Okay, hello and welcome to another one of the NodeConf EU Fireside Chats with me, Katie Roberts. I'm here with Ryan Jarvien, and I got it right?
Excellent, yeah, thank you.
I'm going to talk to him about Kubernetes.
Excellent,
So it's great to meet you, and I was wondering if you could start off by just introducing yourself and telling us a little bit about what you do.
You bet. So I'm a developer advocate on RedHat's OpenShift team. So I generally engage with developers in the community and try to listen to their needs and help them make sense of how they're going to be productive using tools like Kubernetes to host their applications.
Okay, great. So you've been around since the very early days of Node.
Yeah.
Can you tell me a little bit about this?
Yeah. I'm from the Bay Area in California. I've been living there for, about 12, 13 years, and have been doing JavaScript programming most of the time as my primary development language.
Yeah.
So I was definitely around in the early days of the Node.js community. I remember one event particularly, I went to a meetup and was shaking folks' hand on the way in, and they said, "Oh, who are you?" And I said, "Oh, I'm Ryan," and everyone assumed it was Ryan Dahl because I was like, "No, not that Ryan." But yeah, it was a very small community of folks with some really inspiring people that I think really helped set the tone for how to reach out to developers and get people involved. Give them a sense of real agency around owning, kind of hosting and maintaining their own packages, and establishing a real community where folks could share ideas all over the planet and benefit from the, the knowledge that other folks are really gathering in groups all over the place. And I think the NPM ecosystem and the Node School effort were both really inspirational. How quickly those efforts took off, and really cool to see the direction that the Node community took so early on. And the IO.js kind of revolt, I think, was also a really big showing of commitment from the folks who were involved to say, we're going to stand by and maintain this code and try to hold the best interests of the community at heart.
Yeah.
So I think in some ways the Kubernetes community has almost tried to do a little bit of a similar move in part of the goal of Kubernetes is helping you take advantage of large infrastructure as a service platforms and convert that into a Kubernetes system that then you can run a lot of cloud services on top. Node.js plus other languages containerized or virtualized, along with data stores and other really production grade equipment. So.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
So you're here at NodeConf EU to talk about Kubernetes, and you did a workshop yesterday on it.
You
Would you be able to tell me a little bit about that?
Yeah. So we covered in the workshop a lot of basics on how to get started with using the Kubernetes API to provision workloads and manage them. We covered kind of 5 basic API endpoints so people could understand what the underlying mechanics operate, how they work. I think some parts are very familiar to Node developers. The API has kind of a asynchronous nature to it, where you tell it what you want, and then you can continue checking back in, and it'll report back a status that says how far along it's made it in the progress towards achieving whatever you initially asked for. So this asynchronous nature and really good support for JSON object data are areas that Node folks, I think, will find very, very comforting and very familiar. They also have a really nice streaming support on their API that allows you to kind of listen for changes and get updates. And so I think those type of streaming operations are things that the Node community are definitely used to seeing. So I think those are things that they will like. There's a couple things that are a little less easy to use. There's some overloaded terminology a bit, so I definitely gave some couple caveats and look out for these problem areas, particular for Node.js developers. There's a term already in Kubernetes called a node, and it's the machine that you're running your workloads on. So
that's a little confusing.
yeah,
isn't it?
yeah. Having terms like node and service and operator and other things kind of defined multiple times in different communities can make it difficult for those communities to work together in meaningful ways when they're kind of speaking different languages.
Yeah.
So I think the opportunity for me, I think, is what I like doing is in these workshops is helping people translate between how the back-end computing experts are communicating with their industry jargon versus how the front-end Node.js folks are doing their professional business communication at the moment, and helping them kind of bridge the gaps in communication and recognize where there's really excellent tools that other maintainers are actively working on that they could take advantage of.
Okay, that's great, thank you.
Yeah.
You've talked a little about the Node community. Is there a similar sort of community for Kubernetes?
Yeah, so the Node Foundation is the primary governance body for the core Node.js code base. On the Kubernetes side, we have something called the Cloud Native Computing Foundation, which I think is actually a subset of the Linux Foundation. Right. So they do a lot of onboarding for there's different projects that incubate and then get promoted up a couple levels within this CNCF kind of structure. And a lot of different companies are kind of offering solutions, open source solutions in this cloud native space. Not all of them are entirely open source. There's also some kind of proprietary solutions that are definitely show up in this. There's a thing you could look for called the cloud native landscape that has a big board with a bunch of graphics that makes your eyes bleed because there's so many companies jumping in on it. But it's a lot of people getting involved. One thing that RedHat is particularly trying to do to help out as part of this equation is establish something called a operator hub. We have a website called operatorhub.io that showcases a lot of these cloud native solutions where we're partnering up with maintainers in the industry to help try to do shared support and pass some revenue back along to companies like MongoDB and Redis Labs and folks that are doing the work to maintain these data stores and other kind of larger soft infrastructure services. So we're doing a lot of work with the community to enroll those folks and try to set up a structure where folks can get rewarded for the efforts that they're doing to maintain code over time. And people who are hosting large Kubernetes clusters get better access to experts in the industry and information about security patching and other updates that are made available.
And you said something earlier about just the sheer number of comments that had been in GitHub around the Kubernetes project over the last year.
Yeah, so I'm not sure about in the most recent year. I know I looked in the Octoverse report from 2017 had Kubernetes listed as the most discussed or most commented on repo out of everything on GitHub. So it definitely has a lot of user interaction, a lot of people getting involved, and the Kubernetes.org website has a lot of great information for folks who are interested in getting started as contributors. It's mostly Golang, so not a lot of JavaScript, which is...
I've heard that some people like to program in Golang.
But Go is many people would argue, maybe preferred for certain low-level systems work. Yeah. So I know there's definitely a lot of great tools out there, and good to know when to choose the right tool for the job, I think.
Right tool for the right
Yeah.
yeah. So you touched on it just there, but just as a final question, how do people get involved with Kubernetes?
Yeah. Well, if you specifically want to see what advice RedHat has for helping you be productive on Kubernetes, and what we do at RedHat is, if we assume if you want to run a large a Kubernetes style cluster, you're going to be running workloads on top. You're going to want to have access to the logging data from these workloads, or else why even get started, right? So logging, metrics, traces, all types of stuff that you would need to be productive and to fill up your kind of observability checklist of what you need in order to really make sense out of the workloads that you're running. Diagnose them, inspect them, run builds, iterate on those things. We package all of that up, a lot of cloud-native solutions, and put it together in a distribution. RedHat, people are used to hearing about Linux distributions from RedHat, but OpenShift is our Kubernetes distribution. So that combines a lot of that basic tooling that you'd need to be productive with Kubernetes. We kind of think of it like, instead of just giving you the Linux kernel and saying, good luck, you're on your own, you're going to need to write your own bash shell prompt and your own user management. We want to give you a fully functional platform for using Kubernetes and making the most out of it. So the two places I would recommend if you're a developer, you could go to learn.openshift.com. We have Kubernetes environments in a VM that will boot up and hook up to your browser. You get 1 hour with no sign up required, no credit card. It times out after an hour, but you could reload the browser and try another learning scenario. We've got a couple scenarios on how we do JavaScript development using containers and how to do fast, rapid, real-time iteration. And then if you actually want to start your own cluster and run a full OpenShift environment, try.openshift.com is the other URL I'd recommend.
That's really great. Thank you very much, Ryan.
You bet.
It's been a pleasure talking to you.
Great talking with you as well. Thank you.
Thank you.